All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Committee on Commerce. And we will get started in our first session after crossover on a beautiful rainy day, which I'm not complaining about. We can use it still. We have 6 bills to work through this morning, and the first couple are brought to us by Representative Alexander. So I'd like to open the hearing on House Bill 1366 and invite the representative to join us, please. Good morning, sir.
I always enjoy spending time in this committee, so thank you for having me again.
Likewise.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Representative Joe Alexander. I represent the town of Goffstown. I'm here to introduce HB 1336. I think a creative way to get individuals who don't otherwise have housing an ability to have housing. So this bill basically would create an alternative approval pathway for prospective renters who would otherwise be denied housing because they cannot meet standard screening criteria. So the first goal is accomplished by creating a special class of security deposits called a regulated conditional deposit, or RCD. An RCD is an incremental deposit of up to 1 month's rent that a tenant may offer to offset risks associated with qualification shortfalls such as poor credit history, eviction history, or income that is slightly too low. This creates a narrow exception to New Hampshire's standard 1-month cap on security deposits, but only in cases where the applicant would otherwise be denied. The statutory conditions are designed to ensure reasonableness and avoid outcomes where supplying a RCD would stretch a household's finances beyond reasonable limits. So many single-family rentals and owner-occupied properties are already exempt from deposit caps, but HB 1336 conditionally extends that principle to more types of housing in order to reduce denials while preserving existing limits for qualified applicants. The second thing that this bill does is expands the philanthropic capacity of security deposit assistance organizations by legalizing a circular flow of funds, allowing rental charities to manage their resources more like a revolving fund. So the second goal arose in response to concerns raised by rental charities during our public hearing in Housing Committee. Some security deposit assistance organizations expressed concerns that tenants who secure conditional approval using an RCD might request higher levels of financial assistance, which could strain program resources. So the feedback revealed an opportunity to increase the capacity of these organizations by enabling a circular flow of funds between housing providers and rental charities. Under current law, it is illegal for a landlord to refund a security deposit to anyone other than a tenant, even if the deposit originally came from a third party, such as a family member or charity. So as a result, the security deposit assistance is currently a one-way flow of cash. So HB 1336 makes a small change with a significant impact. It legalizes deposit refunds to third-party payers, provided everyone agrees to the arrangement upfront. And once this bill passes, every security deposit assistance organization in the state will have the option to manage charitable funds more like a revolving loan fund. The process is simple. If the landlord and tenant are informed at the time the assistance is given that the refund should return to the charity, the landlord may issue the refund accordingly. And I will say that the Housing Committee's had some great bipartisan work going on. This is one of the bills where I entrusted the housing provider community to work with the tenants' rights advocate organizations. Initially, New Hampshire Legal Assistance was opposed to this bill, and now they're neutral on the bill. And the Property Owners Association supports the bill. So this is a situation in which we came to a compromise. There's things in this bill that I would like to change, but I think this is a careful compromise that would allow people that don't otherwise have access to housing an opportunity to get housing. So for that reason, I'm asking you to vote off to pass. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions for the representative? Senator Rudin.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Representative Alexander. On page 2, lines 6 and 7, one of the criteria where somebody could require a regulated conditional deposit is that they're unable to verify the present landlord reference and the most recent prior reference. Does that cover a lot of people that might not fit in the criteria of the rest of the bill here?
I think it could. I mean, I don't have like extreme heartburn if that's something that you aren't comfortable with, but go ahead.
I ask because on line 16 through 19, it means an otherwise eligible tenant. Because the landlord, and we don't say what kind of efforts the landlord has to make there to reach that, could ask for a rescreening and pay another fee for that. So isn't this just a possibility that a landlord that's lax about trying to find contact references just generates more fees for that tenant?
I believe so, Senator, but I believe there's also protections for in cases of rescreening, and I think that most landlords, if they already pay one application fee for a unit, they're not going to charge another one for a rescreening. And in cases in which this is something that we changed last year, in cases in which they ask for an application fee, they have to return anything other than the actual cost of the application fee, including background check and other like administrative costs. So.
Okay, this line does say disclosing any fees for rescreening. And a follow-up?
Of course.
So this allows a landlord who has a marginal tenant to require an additional security deposit here. Is there any guarantee in here for the tenant if they are willing? They offered the landlord upfront a second security deposit?
I'm going to defer the question. There's there's legal assistance here as well as the landlord community here to answer questions for you.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Oh, yes, Senator Finn.
Representative, thanks for taking my question. Just, reading through this, if someone doesn't meet that standard criteria because they're, let's say, financially unstable, do you think, them requiring more money up front might actually hurt their chances of getting housing?
Well, that's why the second part of this bill comes into play, because basically it would allow charitable organizations to step in at that point and maybe provide that additional security deposit, the RCD, as we say it. And I believe there's a language, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's language in the bill, and I don't know where it is, but basically says like after a certain amount of time of paying rent, they would be able to give that money, the landlord would have to give that money back. So it basically would allow the money up front, but then if the tenant then like gives them, if they pay rent on time and for a certain amount of time, then that RCD goes away and gets paid back.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other questions, appreciate it. Thank you for being here. All right, Nick Norman, please. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you once again for the opportunity to speak. For the record, my name is Nick Norman. I advocate for housing providers and am on the legislative committees and so forth for the Apartment Association of New Hampshire Rental Property Owners Association. And in our membership, we communicate with about 3,500 landlords across the state. We have a pretty wide reach. We worked diligently, hours and hours and hours on this bill with New Hampshire legal assistance. It's a very good compromise. All sides have agreed to this framework. I can answer probably most any of the questions that you have. There's just a few things that I would point out. Everything that Representative Alexander pointed out is correct. So the bill primarily is for the purpose of providing tenants that are marginally qualified that presently often don't meet landlord's approval criteria, to have another mechanism where they can reduce the risk to a landlord so that that landlord could accept them for housing. That's the primary focus of the bill. There was concern from the beginning that this should not become a means of the market standardizing to 2 months security deposit. So there are careful restrictions put into the bill that this extra RCD is only applicable in certain defined situations which are delineated in the bill. In fact, they're delineated so tightly that it reduces significantly the use of the RCD. And that was part of the compromise in the work that we did with New Hampshire Legal Assistance. So I mentioned that. So it is about that list of situations where tenants that don't meet normal criteria don't qualify. We can go through that in more detail during questions if you have it. We strategically chose the name regulated conditional deposit, and we would request that anyone referring to this doesn't call it a second month security deposit, but a regular regulated conditional deposit, because that's what it is. It's named that way so that when somebody hears it, they say, regulated. I better check that out so that I know the rules on using this. Conditional. Well, that means I can't always use it. There's conditions for using it. I better figure that out. Deposit. Deposit, security deposit law has extremely stiff penalties for misuse, which are all still in play in this bill. All of the penalties for misuse of the security deposit still apply. So it causes the person to say, I better learn how this works. In the bill, we put in a standardized form that could be used when someone uses an RCD. And in that form, it delineates all of the parts of the statute that define these parameters. So there could be no misunderstanding. It's all documented up front. We put in an incentive for people to use that form. So to say if they're using it, then you're complying with the regulations about notice. And misuse of that would mean all of those penalties. So there's a strong bias to use the form. It does allow for third-party payors to get the money back that they have put forward. So those agencies which are supporting tenants now could shift all of their contributions into becoming revolving loan funds. So I think it will help support more agencies for providing security deposits. It was also carefully written so that if a landlord and a tenant don't want to use this extra feature, they can just go about business as normal. There's nothing in here that puts additional duties for someone that just wants to continue operating the business like they always have been. And there was, you look into the legislation year after year, and then finally you notice something. So there's also a fix for something in here. The way that the New Hampshire law is presently written, it does not allow a tenant to prepay rent. So while we were here, we fixed that as well. One thing that I think might get not misunderstood, but maybe not noticed, perhaps overlooked. For someone to use this, for a landlord to use this new feature, they're going to have to be very tight with their approval criteria. If you're using approval criteria and you're bending it this way and bending it that way for different situations, you'd be very likely setting yourself up for a discrimination lawsuit. So to use this procedure is going to require the landlords to be, have written procedures, follow their procedures, and not randomly, yes, I'm doing it for you, no, I'm not doing it for you. So I'd be very happy to take questions. And the first thing that I would answer is, someone talked about page 2, lines 6 and 7, first time, or rather present landlord reference and most recent prior reference. That's really good for the first time renter who has no landlord references. It's very hard for them to get approved. It could be used for someone that was a homeowner for years and has no landlord references. It could be used for someone that's been with family for many years but rented so long ago that the landlord reference is no longer available. Many of these provisions are very supportive to tenants. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Reardon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Page 5, starting on line 9 through line 13. In the past, there was a prohibition in New Hampshire about taking advance rental payments. So do I read this correctly, that if I have a 6-month lease, that my landlord could require me to pay all 6 months' rent up front?
Quite a few years ago, sort of yes and no, to be really clear. Several years ago, there was a
It's clear.
bill that came through that was targeted for college students. And college students often get financial aid packages, and they'll get many months' rent at a time. So the bill was written so that leases, not so much that a landlord could require for this person, you're going to pay 6 months in advance. It's not that. A lease could be written that the rent has to be paid 6 months at a time. Or a lease could be written that it could be paid at 3 months at a time, or whatever interval you choose. But interestingly enough, not 2 months at a time. So no, it couldn't require, but you could have a lease written that that's the payment plan.
So can you clarify me why those two things are different?
Which two things?
Having a payment plan that says I pay 3 months worth of rent at a time or 6 months worth of rent at a time, and requiring
Right.
6 months rent up front.
So if you have a lease that's a yearly lease paid monthly, you couldn't have, the landlord could not require the 6 months to be paid in advance. But you could set up a lease that you pay 6 months at a time in advance.
Thank you.
Senator Fett?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. Page 1, line 14. The applicant's combined verifiable household gross income from lawful sources for any size household exceeds 350% of the federal poverty guidelines for a household size of 2 as reported. So I'm confused. Why is the benchmark 350% of the federal guidelines for a household size of 2 regardless of size? What is it for a family of 4 or a family of 1?
Right. I can definitely speak to that. This provision, subparagraph B, might have been one of the provisions that's had the most amount of time defining. It defines a level of income. I sent out yesterday to everyone through email a very thorough analysis of all of these things, and in there it talks about that. In the present numbers of federal poverty guidelines, this comes out to something in the range of $75,000 of income. And it was chosen as an amount, not based on family size, but just an amount. And the idea that came behind that was people were concerned that tenants of low income would be more often targeted to require 2 months security deposit to be required in RCD. So it was desired from the tenant advocacy side that the RCD would not be allowed for low income tenants because they wouldn't, in many cases, have the financial means to pay it. And there was a concern that it would shut them out of housing. So a number was picked, and that's the number they picked. It's not so much that it's a family of 2 or it's the federal guideline. It's to get to a number in a way that's definable that changes with time.
Just quick follow-up. So what is the benchmark then for a family of 4?
I'd have to look that up I mean, what is the number?
Yeah, in this bill, what is the benchmark? I see a benchmark.
There's
for
no
family of two.
benchmark for family of four.
But we're signaling out a family of two for the benchmark?
We're defining a number of income. Presently, the income is around 75,000. When you look at a family of two on that chart, you get an income of 75,000. So the point of the bill is not to say certain levels of households, but to get a number that can be found in a federal document that you can look up each year. And so right now, that's 75,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And please feel free to reach out to me, you
Okay.
know.
Mr. Nick Taylor. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Nick Taylor, the Director of Housing Action, New Hampshire. So we are here in opposition to this bill. We do really appreciate all the work and the intent behind it, all the work that went in from the parties working on the amendment, but disagree with the sort of general premise behind what we're trying to solve. We believe that if you're trying to give access to more folks to housing, the way to do that is to build more housing so that they have the options, not try to put our finger on the scale of making one group of folks more desirable or less risky to rent to, especially when we're thinking about not the neediest group of folks, right? And so while this is well-intentioned, we think we need to be really careful about non-supply side solutions that are not aimed at the most needy, the lowest income folks in our communities. And that's what this is doing. This is taking that scarce, limited resource of housing availability and trying to take one group of folks, the folks that have the money to put down a conditional deposit, make them less risky to rent to. And that is creating another class of folks who, if you're the lowest income, makes you even further less desirable to rent to because you don't have the money up front. And that could create sort of this race to the bottom, where if you're the lowest income, you don't have the money to put forward to rent. And if you're the next tier up that doesn't qualify for this, then maybe you're asked to prepay multiple months in advance to make yourself more competitive with someone who is putting down money or can put down money for the conditional deposit. And a lot of the analysis of renters here in New Hampshire is that folks do not have that money to put up front. Only about 1 in 4 New Hampshire households have $2,000 in savings, according to a recent report from the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute. And when you're talking about the first month's rent, the deposit, and the conditional deposit, when the median rent in New Hampshire is about $2,000, that's $6,000 up front for folks. It may work for a college student that has family that can put money to help them, who doesn't have a prior landlord, who doesn't have a ton of credit history. But when you're talking about members of the workforce, we don't think this is a feasible path forward. And we do, while we appreciated the work around the nonprofits that are providing down payment assistance and trying to allow for that direct reimbursement, what you're still doing is creating a higher threshold, more money that folks need to put down if they're an organization that is helping with down payment assistance. And so if you had, $4,000 and you could help 2 people with $2,000 deposit, now you're helping 1 person with $4,000 deposit. And whether that gets reimbursed directly to you or not, that means you're still helping 1 fewer person with that money that you are bringing forward. And so we do think there are other solutions to reach this population. Obviously, building more housing is the first one, but there are other organizations. Granite United Way's Key Connect program is helping landlords with making investments in their properties, getting things up to code if they're having to rent to HUD-related, a HUD voucher. Other programs that are trying to incentivize landlords, making it easier to screen tenants, providing other supportive services, trying to be part of the solution there. So again, we appreciate the work that went into this, but we don't think this is a feasible solution. We don't think it will help the population it's trying to help.
All right, thank you. Questions? Senator Rear?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Has the vacancy rate changed are landlords having a hard time getting applicants for apartments so that they might be looking for riskier tenants?
Everything we've heard is that there still is an incredible demand for each apartment vacancy that comes open, especially things that are more affordable for folks. And when you're weighing these 2 tenants against each other, you're going to have a lot of options. There's going to be a very competitive environment as it is.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We have two people here from the New Hampshire Local Welfare Administrators Association. I don't know if you'd like to come up together or separately. Are you here? They signed in to speak. Todd Marsh. There we go. Okay. You don't need to come up together, but if you'd like to, feel free. Yeah, okay.
Thank you for the support.
All right. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Nice to see you on this beautiful day. At least,
not bad.
at least inside.
Yeah. It's always beautiful in the Commerce
That's right.
Committee. Yeah. In Concord. Oh, in Concord, it's always beautiful. I don't know. Bradford's.
The sun always shines.
Yeah, all right. If you could state your name and your organization, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Todd Marsh. I serve as the welfare director for the city of Rochester. I am appearing today as president of the New Hampshire Local Welfare Association on behalf of our board and membership throughout the state, which includes larger cities and many small towns, including from rural areas. I am here to respectfully oppose HB 1336 as currently written. In our daily work, we see the on-the-ground reality of the housing challenge. We recognize the perspective of our landlord friends, and they are, including smaller owners. We are looking at the financial risk, who are looking for financial risk mitigation. If the intent is to encourage housing for New Hampshire residents who might otherwise be bypassed due to credit or background issues, we understand that goal. Risk mitigation is a valid policy conversation. And multi-pronged approaches are needed. Our board also recognizes and is mindful that the current amendment is a result of a significant negotiation involving diverse interests. We want to be sensitive to that, as we are aware that collaborative efforts can lead to uncommon progress. However, our specific vantage point as municipal welfare administrators, we believe serious consequences remain. With rents at historic highs, we are deeply concerned that these regulated conditional deposits could become the default rather than a target exception. For many working families, as you're aware, coming up with first month's rent and 1 month security deposit is already a mountain to climb. Adding a second security deposit or conditional security deposit, regulated security deposit, would be an additional challenge for them. From our municipal perspective, we anticipate that this will result in an increased demand on local welfare to bridge the new financial gap. This essentially shifts the cost of risk mitigation from the private sector onto the local property taxpayer with additional costs, often for households that could have managed a standard move-in on their own, but simply cannot overcome the barrier of a second deposit, albeit conditional and well-intended. Because of these unintended consequences, our association recommends a vote of inexpedient to legislate. However, if this committee still seeks to move this bill forward, our Municipal Welfare Association respectfully asks that you consider 2 points of taxpayer protection to ensure this bill aligns with existing municipal operations. First, we ask that municipalities be exempt from providing this regulated conditional security deposit. Our request is that municipal assistance remain capped at the traditional 1 month limit. This maintains consistency for local welfare budgets or municipal budgets and ensures that the taxpayer is not tasked with providing a double security deposit, or again, regulated conditional security deposit. Second, we seek to ensure proper fiscal stewardship of public funds. We would hope to see a clear and legally structured mechanism where any security deposits paid by a municipality, less any lawful deductions, are returned directly to that municipality upon termination of tenancy. I recognize there is some language in the negotiation regarding third parties. However, I think that we believe that further clarification could be helpful legally. The the Local Welfare Association will be providing specific language considerations to this committee shortly. We intend for these suggestions to be mindful of the already negotiated language, while ensuring necessary protections for the municipal taxpayer. Today reminds me of a quote that I'm sure many of you have heard. If it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. Regulated conditional deposits are security deposits, albeit structured differently in another name. And we admit, with good intentions. We just believe it needs more work and it needs more clarification. And again, we will be submitting some clarifying type language to you shortly.
Okay. All right.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Ma'am, would you like to add to that or?
Sorry about that.
My name is Bernadette Terrio. I'm the Welfare Director for the town of Pittsfield, New Hampshire. I'm also on the New Hampshire Local Welfare Association Board. What I would like to just put out there is that from a local welfare perspective, my town in particular, we have 59.8% of the people in our town are renters. That leaves 40.2% of our properties being lived in and managed by actual taxpayers per se. We have recently, over the last few years, had a couple of really big corporations purchase 15 very large apartment buildings in town. And since they've come into town, it has been very difficult to have those regular conversations that we used to have with the landlords. That has turned into a difficulty for municipalities, especially for us, because when we had the conversations with the landlords, we knew where our tenants stood. Now we don't know until it's almost too late. If we are required to pay additional security deposit, conditional, whatever you want to call it, our budgets are going to be destroyed. 59.8% of the people in my town could be coming to ask for additional money to be able to find an apartment. And my budget can't handle that. We're in our third year of default budget. It's very expensive to run a town, as I'm sure a city or whatever you're in, as you all know. And putting this back on taxpayers is going to be really tough for us. And in addition, there's talk about the charities that are out there that can help out. They're fewer and fewer. I've been a welfare director since 1998. And over the last 8 years, the funding that we had access to has diminished dramatically. So I would just like to remind you that in theory, it might sound good, but in practice, it's going to be a tough situation for many cities and towns. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? It's Senator Reardon. I'm surprised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, of course.
A question, I think, from Mr. Marsh. So if in fact this was modified so that the town was in on a 1 security deposit deal as opposed to a 2 security deposit deal, and a tenant defaulted in the second month, would it, and let's say a nonprofit has done the second security deposit, is it your expectation that you would get the leftover money back, or that the nonprofit, the last in who took the risk, would get money back? So let's say the tenant pays the first month's rent, you pay the security deposit, a nonprofit pays the third one. They default in month 2 and they abandon the apartment. So there's a security deposit sitting out there. Are you entitled to that, or the nonprofit?
I appreciate the question. I think our expectation is that the municipality would receive the money back if it is a security deposit. Because, we know what security deposits are for. And in the current RSA 165, people receiving assistance are not to receive cash from municipalities. Now, for security deposits, they are not necessarily receiving direct cash from the municipality, but they can receive cash indirectly at the time of exit from the apartment. And I will say that it is not impossible. However, it is challenging to track from a municipality perspective, track security deposits and when tenants come and go. We would need to rely on the good faith of our landlord friends to inform us of that.
Follow up? So in fact, under this scheme of conditional deposits, a tenant that proves themselves that they can pay the rent is able to get that security deposit back at some point in their tenancy. So would you be tracking it so you would get that back?
Well, I think if the tenant pays the conditional regulated security deposit, then I believe that they should be entitled to that back and not the municipality. It's if the municipality pays, they should be receiving that money back for the taxpayers of that community.
One more follow-up.
Yes, ma'am.
But my understanding is that you're willing to be the first security deposit. You don't want to be the conditional security deposit, which is the risky position. So if that's coming back, you believe the person that's taken the greatest risk, the second security deposit, doesn't get that money back, you do?
I think my initial thought is that if it's clear that if we are upfront paying the security deposit and that's what it is, and we're clear on that, then that payment would return back to the city. If it's not, and it's clear that that the resident is paying for the conditional security deposit.
Or some nonprofit.
Or some nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I think that would be up to the nonprofit as far as how they want to navigate that. But if a nonprofit was not involved and the tenant is putting money into this, I think they should get that money back. But we would need to track it. We would need to verify. Again, I think there's more to it than some may think. Not impossible, but it would create some challenges.
So you'd have to set up a system.
We would have to set up a system. And that's why we're asking for, I think there would need to be more clarification. I'm just not, our board isn't there yet. I need that permission from our board to give you language.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I only have one. Senator Fett. Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I forgot your name. What was your name, Miss?
Bernadette Terrio.
Bernadette, you made an excellent point. I'm reading through this language in the bill, and I guess page 2, line 6, the prospective landlord was unable to verify the present landlord references and the most recent prior landlord reference. So why should the applicant be penalized because a prior landlord or property owner didn't respond?
They shouldn't be.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
Next up is Jennifer Chisholm. Good morning.
Good morning on this rainy Tuesday. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to this. My name is Jennifer Chisholm, and I am the Executive Director of New Hampshire Coalition to End Homelessness. The coalition absolutely appreciates the work that has been put into this bill, and we still have several concerns about it, and so we are in opposition to it. So several people have already discussed some of my concerns, which you can see in my my written testimony. And you'll also see that I included with my written testimony the story of a New Hampshire mom named Adrienne, who is a mom that HB 1336 would really create additional barriers for. She's a mom who has a master's degree, she has a career, she has a great rental history, but unfortunately lives in a really expensive part of the state. And so she could not find an apartment that was less than 50% of her monthly income. And so this just will we're concerned about working families in New Hampshire as well. So you can read that. But what I wanted to talk about was the impact that it would have on New Hampshire's service provider safety net. That safety net already cannot keep up with the demand for security deposits in the state. And so the Fair Housing Advisory Council in New Hampshire had identified this as an issue last year. And so the coalition partnered to help convene in December 19 service providers from 10 agencies across New Hampshire to just talk about the issue and help try and figure out some solutions and troubleshoot. And so the current available funds, like I said, don't meet the current demand. And so agencies were talking about how they were running out of the money several months after they were released to them. And so in fact, one of the agencies was talking about how they received their funds in July, and by September, they had to put it on pause for applications because they had either spent the money or the money was already promised. And then others reported that they were having to pace their money, and so limiting applications each month so that they could have some funding across the year. And so that's with one security deposit for each family that's renting who needs that. And in 2025, New Hampshire 211 reported that they had over 1,000 calls from New Hampshire residents needing help with that 1 month's security deposit, right? And so doubling the amount of that security deposit not only is going to impact vulnerable families, but it's also going to put the service providers in even more of a bind, trying to help as many people that they can. And so we are concerned that due to that, HB 1336 will contribute to homelessness in New Hampshire, including families who can't afford that second secure month's worth of conditional I can't remember what it's called, but the security deposit, and end up having to double up with friends and family, affecting the children, and all of that. So I thank you for your consideration of this testimony and am open to questions.
All right. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 1336 who I haven't called or maybe didn't sign up? All right, seeing none, we're going to close the hearing on House Bill 1336, and I'm going to refer it to our subcommittee on housing so we can give this a deeper look and see what makes sense. All right, we're going to open the hearing on House Bill 1523, and I would like to invite the prime sponsor, Representative Joe Alexander, to join us. Good morning again.
Thank you, Chairman Senator Innes and members of Senate Commerce. For the record, my name is Joe Alexander. I represent the town of Goffstown. So if you're going to change anything in this bill, I'd recommend you change the title because this has nothing to do with condo associations. This has everything to do with homeowners associations. So basically under existing laws, there really is no law around transparency in homeowner associations. So what this would do is mirror the requirements of transparency in the condo law and move it over to the homeowner association law. Now, if I wanted to do a direct copy and paste of the condo association law over to the homeowner association law, this bill would be like 15 pages. And I've been in the House long enough to know that a 15-page bill doesn't usually fly. So what I asked for was the most critical things that we could put in here to make sure that there is transparency in homeowner associations. And I'll have people here to testify at why we need this. I think senators could agree that more transparency when you own a home in a homeowner association, you want to know what's going on your boards. So basically this would add some requirements such as shareholder responsibility, personnel salary, what they're spending money on, things like that. The housing committee made a couple changes to this bill, primarily at the end where we talked about, it's page 3, section 5, basically a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest. If they're basically contracting a lawn care company or something like that, the board member would then disclose they have an interest in that. Or cars, if they're buying a certain car and you were God forbid, you were on a certain board, and I don't know, you'd have too many responsibilities, Senator Fenton. But so we made that change, and then there was a request of the realtors and I believe the condo association is here. Some group is here to testify. They also made a request to move out the effective date. So what we did was move out the effective date because there may be homeowner associations that don't have this information. This would give them time to gather it. I firmly believe that if they don't have this information, they should definitely get it, because I think whether or not this bill goes through, this is very important transparency information. And if I was a homeowner in a homeowner association, I would want the same protections that I have as a condo owner currently. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. If the Senate would like to expand this to a 15-page bill, they're certainly more than welcome to, but I actually think that this is a good start, and I think it adds much needed protections for homeowner association or owners in association.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions? Got off easy.
Thank you. That was
All
easy.
right. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. All right, Angela O'Neill. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Angela O'Neill, and I'm a homeowner in Moulton Borough whose community is managed by an HOA. So we are in support of the transparency. It's really important. My neighbors and I put a tremendous amount of investments in our homes. It's not connected. They're all individual homes. And many of us live there full time. When you think of Moulton Borough, you think of the lake, you think everybody goes up on the weekends, but there's many of us who live there full time. And to be able to see even who's being paid and what they're being paid to manage our roads, because they are private roads, to manage our landscaping, we have a private beach, all of those items, we don't know who's responsible for what. And when people have asked to see that information, they're generally denied, which doesn't make any sense. So we want to make sure that the bill balances transparency with the same protections for the individuals for their financial and personal information also. As Representative Alexander said, it does mimic the condominium law, so it doesn't put any added pressure onto the HOA. They shouldn't have to, hopefully they have all the information. They shouldn't have to go create a lot of documentation just to meet the needs. They just need to be transparent about it. The other piece of transparency that is important that we've seen personally in our community is they'll have private hearings and then not share what was discussed or what was decided or why it was decided in those closed doors hearings. So for us, it's really just about the transparency, being able to see the information, being able to see why decisions were made and where the money is going.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions, Senator Reardon?
Thank you,
just
Mr.
have to
Chair.
give you a little
Do you elect a board of directors in your
We
neighborhood?
do.
Okay, that's all I had to ask. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, we have two folks from CAI. Would you like to come together or separately? All right. So you're either Gary or Paul. Okay. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Gary Daddario. I am a association attorney, meaning that that's what my practice is. I just represent associations. I am here today on behalf of the Community Associations Institute, CAI. They are a nationwide nonprofit organization whose singular and sole goal in life is just to make association living better. And so they have folks like me and like Paul Okonak, who's with me today. Folks like us volunteer time for this organization to try to assist, participate in things like this, just to try to make the world as good as we can for associations. I'm going to start by saying we certainly don't oppose this bill. Transparency is a good thing. It is important for people who own in an association to be able to know what's going on and to get their records. And I'll start here. As much as I understand the difficulty with a 15-page bill, and I understand why someone wouldn't want to get into that, in a perfect world, New Hampshire would one day have a homeowners association act in the same way that we have a condominium act and we have a timeshare act. For other types of property ownership, there's an act that sort of has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you can get most of the information, if not all, that you need within that act. So ideally, someday, it would be nice for someone to take that task on for HOAs, so that they have an act that's similar to look at to the condominiums and the timeshares in terms of getting your governance information in one place. As to this particular bill, just a couple of points we wanted to make that as edits we think would make for a better situation. Line 1 on page 2 speaks to when an association would need to provide the records that are being requested. And right now it says 5 days. Using condominiums by analogy, in the Condominium Act, the association is afforded 15 days. We think that something beyond 5 should be the measure, only because the concern is that a window that short could set the stage for failure. Meaning that if an owner happens to make a records request at a time when a person is on just a run-of-the-mill sort of standard, 1 week vacation, with 5 days being the notice period, now there's going to be a violation. There's no way around it. So we think a little more time makes sense just to account for general life. Not that it should be hard for an association to find its own records, but just that, whoever's doing it presumably has a job, a personal life, might go on vacation, and might just need some time to put things together. With respect to meeting minutes, this bill doesn't describe anything about sort of the process of them. But again, by analogy with the Condominium Act, boards approve meeting minutes. And before they can do that, the meeting minutes need to be created and circulated. Maybe they need editing. Maybe something was reported incorrectly and it's going to be corrected. But basically, there's a process to approving the meeting minutes. So similar to the Condominium Act, we think it would make sense to put some language in here with respect to meeting minutes that says that they would be available to the owners either within 15 days after they've been approved, or, and I think it's to address, if a board were for whatever reason being completely inactive, but the Condominium Act goes on to say, or 60 days from the time of the meeting, whichever occurs first. So the board has 15 days to get their approvals done and make meeting minutes available. If they should fail to take action, then at the 60-day mark, the meeting minutes are available either way. That's sort of the outer deadline. The other comment I wanted to make was on the section, also page 2, this is now down at line 29. They're speaking about executive sessions of boards, and this language appears to come right from the Condominium Act, which is absolutely fine. But as someone who deals with a lot of associations and a lot of condominiums, I just wanted to raise some issues, some problems that associations are having with this language. It says that the board may hold an executive session only during a regular or special meeting. And the problem that we're seeing with that in the real world when this is put into operation is that boards that schedule a meeting and the community arrives and then they go into executive session because that's really all they're trying to do, you end up with a room full of people who say, why did I even come here? You're wasting my time. And you called this meeting, but you're just doing an executive session and that's it. And then there's this little bit of friction and possibly waste of people's time. So to the extent that the law is going to identify the particular purposes for which a board can have an executive session, and to the extent that boards are allowed to do that, and obviously they're now going to be keeping records, better records, it seems to make sense to allow them to call an executive session if that's what they're doing. In other words, don't call a regular meeting and then have the point be only that you're going into executive session. The other issue that we see in practice with the executive sessions is on line 30, where it says no final vote or action shall be taken during an executive session. And the problem in practice there is that if you've got a subject matter that by law is appropriate for executive session, And so, for instance, maybe they're talking about litigation or potential litigation or something that they're working on with their legal counsel. If you can't take a vote or make a decision in the executive session, then you have to come out of it and do that at the regular meeting. And it really rather destroys the privacy of the executive session if the board has to come out of it and then take a vote on whether or not they're willing to settle the case for $40,000. And once that information is out there, for obvious reasons, it can be problematic when it's out there too early. There was an example in my practice where there was an association negotiating for the contract for the propane company that would service hundreds of units at the property. And unbeknownst to folks, there was an employee of one of the companies who lived at the association who was in the room. And that's just an easy real life example of why, if something is appropriate under the law to be private information, it needs to stay that way at least until the situation's resolved. And so to say there'll be no vote or decision in an executive session means you have a private discussion, then you show up at a meeting, have a motion and a vote and make a decision that everybody sees, and now they basically know all they need to know from what was supposed to be the private discussion. So we think that if a subject matter is appropriate for executive session and the board is having an executive session consistent with the law, they should be able to make a decision on that subject matter at that session. I would say it would make sense to treat these things like contracts, meaning that in the Condominium Act, and actually I think they used that language in this bill as well. For instance, a contract that's under negotiation is not yet a public record for the association, but once it's finished and the terms have been negotiated and the contract is signed, that completed document is a record of the association for everyone to see. So I think it's just an issue of timing. Things should stay private when they're private and then become public when it's time for them to become public. And that was really all we had on this.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Rishardi.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my question.
Sure, thank you.
I could see some of your first 2 points and what you were articulating, but on this last point, transparency is important. And as a former town councilor, we always had the meeting. People had their public comments, they had their time to speak, and then we often have to go in non-public and people would leave the room. It's not an unusual situation to do it that way.
So I don't necessarily think that boards should be prohibited from doing it that way. I just see that in practice, it has caused some issues for associations and condominiums where if the point that evening is that the board needs to get into executive session for something, then to call a meeting and then the meeting begins and then they go into executive session just sort of frustrates everybody. But if that's what they're doing, then I think they should be able to do it and then people wouldn't be frustrated to appear at a meeting for no reason. Whereas if the board is having a meeting and discussing issues that either become delicate or that there's going to be a public discussion before the private discussion, I just think they should be able to do whatever fits the situation.
Follow up? Well, okay, but you could put the meeting has been posted, an executive session may follow when you post the public meeting. So there would be no shock to anyone. Just a little more transparency.
Sure, they could do that. And by the way, to be clear, I don't mean to suggest that the executive session would be a secret, meaning that the community doesn't know what's happening. It's just that it would be nice for people to accidentally show up for something and then realize it was sort of a waste of time.
Thank you.
But I do think the executive sessions, the fact that they're happening, that they've been scheduled, I think that should be part of the public record for the association.
Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I don't know if you practice outside of New Hampshire or know through your association with CAI, Are there other states that have homeowners association kind of process in statute?
I believe that there are. I do practice in one other state, and we do see various statutes, including the homeowners, including the timeshares. Some states, one in which I practice, has a specific statute for cooperatives.
New
So,
Hampshire? Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
And I see that in Massachusetts as well, that there's a cooperative act. So basically, for the most part, when there's a particular form of property ownership, it seems that there's an act or statute that goes along with it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Join us? No? Okay, very good. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 1523? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing on 1523 and refer this one to the Housing Subcommittee as well. All right, next up, we have House Bill 1588, and I'm told that Representative Alexander will be introducing that this morning. Welcome back.
Thank you. Unfortunately, this is the last time I'm going to be here today. So for the record, my name is Representative. I'll be back later, I'm sure, at some point. For the record, my name is Representative Joe Alexander. I represent the town of Goffstown. I'm here to introduce this bill on behalf of my dear friend, Representative Sweeney, who is with his daughter today. So HB 1588 gives municipalities a new local financing tool to pay for infrastructure that directly benefits new development. It allows cities and towns to create special assessment districts so the properties that receive the benefit of the improvement can help cover the cost. It also helps building a funding stream for infrastructure by directing the proceeds of the sale of state lands were not otherwise appropriated by the legislature to BEA for infrastructure grant and investments. So you'll see that this allows for this at the end of the bill, but it just puts $1 in the fund to allow for the establishment of the fund. It does not make any appropriation. So what the bill does is it limits eligible projects of infrastructure tied to development, including roads, sidewalk lighting, traffic control devices, water mains, sewer lines. And it requires that the assessments be levied only on properties receiving a direct and ascertainable benefit. One of the biggest barriers to housing and redevelopment is not always the private project itself, it's the cost of the public infrastructure needed to support it. So this bill recognizes that and pairing a local financing tool with a potential state infrastructure funding source. So what this is not, it's not a statewide mandate, it's not a general tax increase, it's not a blank check, and it's not the same as TIF districts. So one of the key distinctions, I know Senator Reardon was about to ask that, but one of the key distinctions from TIF is it TIF captures future tax increment after the development happens. 1588 allows a municipality to finance the infrastructure upfront based on a direct assessment on the benefited parcels. So TIF is about capturing future growth. HB 1588 is about making the growth possible in the first place. So this is a local option. So municipalities are allowed to adopt this if they want. I believe it is 2/3 vote of the governing body to establish it and the majority vote of the legislative body. So the 2/3, I think, is a big standard to have. So it would protect from abuse. It's an optional, locally controlled opportunity. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily consider this an extra tax because it's a special assessment on a specific project that is already going to go forward. So only parcels in the districts that are benefiting are going to see like this sort of tax. To close up, it's a practical local option. It gives municipalities fair and targeted way to finance improvements that unlock development. It creates a pathway for state land proceeds, and it assigns local benefit. It basically, I think it's a good bill. It allows municipalities to expand their infrastructure, and I think that is one of the key impediments to housing growth. So with that, I'm asking you to vote ought to pass.
Okay. Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions? All right. Thank you. Appreciate you
Thank
being
you
here.
again.
All right, Nick Taylor, New Hampshire Housing Action. Would like to speak? Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Nick Taylor, Director of Housing Action, New Hampshire. So we support the concept here. As the representative mentioned, the infrastructure challenges are real and a big barrier to building more housing. We're all for putting more tools in the toolbox for municipalities that want to bring this forward. And the New Hampshire Zoning Atlas team, when they did their water and sewer analysis statewide, found that only about 5.6% of all buildable land has access to water and sewer infrastructure. About 12 has water or sewer. So clearly a challenge. One thing that we do want to just raise for the committee is there is a existing chapter in state law 52-A that allows for the establishment of special assessment districts. It is not specific to water and sewer infrastructure, and the initiation process there is 50% of, it's a petition base where it starts. And so it's 50% of the properties in the district and 65% of the assessed value. Well, this is started by the governing body with the votes, as the representative mentioned. So I think it's a good idea. We would encourage just to make sure that those two chapters work together so that municipalities, as they're implementing this, are not confused as to whether to use 52A or this new 162V that's being established.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate it. Jack Ruderman, is that the correct? Oh, you're not. You're right, you're not. Okay, all right, very good. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 1588? All right, seeing none, we'll close the hearing on 1588. Should I refer this one to that? Okay, and we'll refer this one to the Housing Subcommittee as well. Senator Reardon confirmed my suspicion that was a good move. So thank you, Senator. All right. Thank you. That one. Do we? Oh, yeah.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, Representative. I'm going to open the hearing on House Bill 1207 and welcome Representative Hunt. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, I'm John Hunt, representing the town of Rindge, New Hampshire. For this is my 40th year. So, the chairman on the House side, when it comes to departments, and we oversee banks and insurance, departments will come to us with what we've called housekeeping legislation, or legislation related to issues that have come up. And this bill is that. So the House Commerce Committee did have its subcommittee, and we worked on line items and sections of the bill, making sure we understood what everything was trying to do here, and that we were on board. But we did get down to the wire, and there was one issue that was outstanding between the banks, and that is your amendment. And yes, everybody gives this amendment the blessing. I would be happy to say is that that once they really, and the bankers understood what the department was doing and why this was made sense, that they were willing to compromise and go with this amendment.
Okay, very good. Any questions for the representative? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll see you again in a few minutes.
Yes.
Yes. All right. The bankers are here. Ryan Hale. Not to speak. I see that. We only have a few speakers. So the banking department is here. And we have Amelia Galdieri and Seth Zaraki. Good morning, gentle people. I should have called you first anyhow, so sorry about that.
No worries. Good morning. For the record, my name is Amelia Galdieri. I'm the Bank Commissioner for the state of New Hampshire. With me is Seth Zaraki, General Counsel for the Banking Department. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on HB 1207 this morning. As Representative Hunt said, HB 1207 is kind of the department's omnibus cleanup bill, if you will, for the year. It was drafted at the request of the Banking Department.
I'm going to talk about kind of at a high level what the bill does, and then Seth is going to talk about the amendment and any of the details that may be helpful to the committee. So the big thing that this bill does is it changes the way that the department brings in revenue. It doesn't change our budget, obviously, that's set, all set. It really just affects how we collect our money. We're a self-funded agency. So every year we receive an appropriation pursuant to our budget. And then throughout the course of the fiscal year, we collect fines and fees to sort of pay back that appropriation, if you will. And at the end of the year, to the extent the fines and fees do not cover the full extent of our budget, we do an assessment on licensed and chartered entities to make up that difference. So again, we're fully funded by the entities under our regulation. Starting with, we have two kind of broad types of entities under our jurisdiction. We have licensed entities and then we have chartered entities. For the chartered entities, the change that we're proposing is to eliminate exam fees on an hourly basis for the exams we conduct, and instead charge all of those chartered entities a flat fixed basis fee. That's essentially the average of what we would take in from each of those entities annualized. We conduct examinations every 18 months, so the exam cycle looked a lot like this, and this smooths it out and makes it predictable for the entities under our jurisdiction. It was actually requested that some of the entities asked for us to try to smooth it out, so this was our best attempt at being responsive to those requests. The second big way it changes how we bring in revenue is for the licensed entities. We charge a fee for applications every year. The licenses expire and we have to renew those licenses. Most of those fees had not been looked at since, in one case, I think the 1970s. So it was time to take a look at those and adjust them for inflation. So that's another big thing that this bill does. And hopefully the effect of that will be for the licensed entities, we almost never conduct an assessment at the end because we bring in enough through fines and fees. However, because the licensing fees were so low compared to the states surrounding us, compared to our budget, what we were having to do was increase the fee that we charge for our exams to kind of compensate for that. So hopefully this correctly brings in our revenue in a way that makes sense and is in alignment with what we really do in the business we conduct. So those are kind of the big things. The other items in the bill are really cleanup, and I'll let Seth speak to those and talk about the amendment.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Seth Zaraki, I'm the General Counsel of the New Hampshire Banking Department. I think Commissioner Galdieri largely covered the bill. I will touch on the amendment just for clarification purposes, because there have been a few iterations of this bill as it's gone through the process. So as the Commissioner mentioned, the primary objective of House Bill 1207 is to simplify, streamline, and update the statutory fee mechanisms by which the Banking Department as a self-funded agency is funded. So what this will do, it'll restructure the way in which the Banking Department collects examination fees without increasing revenue. The bill would eliminate the current regular examination fee charged to New Hampshire state chartered depository banks, credit unions, trust companies, and family trust companies in connection with regular examinations, and replace it with a fixed, predetermined annual fixed base fee. And just on that point, the Senate amendment that we've been working with Senator Innis's office on incorporates the version that passed the House. It applied this framework to the credit unions, trust companies, and family trust companies. The Senate amendment now brings in the depository banks. So it effectively, the version with the Senate amendment now covers all of our state chartered institutions. Now, under current state law, the Banking Department examines state chartered institutions once every at least 18 months and is required to collect those exam fees upon the conclusion of each examination. The current regular exam fees will be eliminated as to these institutions and replaced by this annual fixed base fee, which will be assessed on a predictable annual basis beginning in about December 2027. With that, I also distributed a handout that goes through some of the additional housekeeping items, and happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Senator Fett?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. So the last modernization bill we had, I think, was HB 1243, dealing with RSA 361A, the audits. And this is kind of similar to that. And I've heard from a lot of small businesses, small retailers, that there's a tremendous burden with these audits happening right now. And I'm just fearful that, we're trying to modernize this again, but in RSA 361A, there are issues that are being asked of these small businesses, cited for lender-provided forms that should be resolved with lenders. The average billing is over $800 a day with no transactional item list. So what I'm looking for is not a change to this, but potential, because we are giving you more rulemaking authority essentially. So what I'm looking for is there a way to work with the department, possibly next legislative session, kind of fix some of these gaps?
Sure. We're always open to working with anyone at any time. I think we have a pretty close relationship with the Auto Dealers Association to the extent that chapter covers this. I will say that we purposefully did not adjust any of the fees that are applicable to entities that are licensed under 361A, because we know that's been a change for them, having that law modernized and brought into line with all of our other statutes. So we didn't want to shock them with any sort of changes. We purposefully left them out of this. And again, just globally, the per diem charge that we charge for the exams on that side of the house for the licensed entities, our goal is to hopefully be able to lower it, because now we're raising the licensing fees. So it should hopefully have the effect of right-sizing the exam costs, because now we've right-sized the licensing fees. So, but yes, I'm also open to discussing anything going forward.
Exactly. Follow up, hopefully is good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to working together on this, trying to close any of those loopholes.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you tell me just a little bit about the process of how you changed the itemized examination fees to the flat fees? What was that? How did you calculate that?
Sure. So we took, we looked at exam fees over time. So we basically, every 18 months, we examine these entities. So that means on average, with a little wiggling room to line up with our federal counterparts, we did 2 exams of these entities every 3 years. So we kind of took an average, spread it out over those 3 years, and it's almost exactly $23,000 on the nose.
23,000.
Yeah, which I think is the flat fee that we all agreed to, yes.
So of the list of entities here, they're really varying sizes. So does a really large bank get charged the same as a very small, say, family trust company?
Not, the family trust companies are different. They're covered by an $11,000 fee because they're examined every 5 years. So family trust companies sort of put those to the side. They're their own special animal.
A credit union.
Sure, a credit union trust, a regular public trust company, sure. So what we found is that for banks and credit unions, what really drives the change in the how much we might charge for any given exam is the participation of our federal counterparts. Because what really drives our charging, our bill is by how many examiners we assign to any given exam. Now, there's some variation. If you have a very complex entity, perhaps it takes a little bit more time. If you have a very large entity, perhaps we assign an extra examiner. But what really drives it is the participation by the NCUA, the FDIC, and the Fed. And if you're following along, there's a lot of changes going on at those agencies now. They've 2 out of those 3 have had 30% cuts in their staffing. And then I believe that they've just announced that there's a 30% staffing cut for the Fed now. So they're all going to be, they've all had to go through some changes. So when we looked at this, we thought, truly we're thinking, what can we do in New Hampshire to help with that? Because, when there's a lot of change going on over here, I think it's good to be steady as we can be. So that was another goal that we accomplished through that, is that because if suddenly there's no examiners coming from the FDIC, we were going to have to send a bunch of examiners. And then if suddenly there's a bunch of examiners coming from the FDIC because they don't have office space or whatever might be going on there, then we don't want to have our entities experience that bill from us. So this is like the secondary effect of trying to make this all steady and smooth for everyone.
How do our, may I follow up?
Of course.
How do our New Hampshire depository institutions pay for a federal examination?
They have, it's fully assessment based on their rating, I believe. There's little nuances to it that I would have to go and research for you. But at a baseline level, it's assessment, pure assessment. Thank you.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 4 of the bill. It looks like there's some other stuff going on in terms of removing some language dealing with felonies that have been pardoned. So beyond the fees, could we talk a little bit about that and why and what that's doing exactly?
Yes, Senator. So that section of the bill relates to RSA 397A. That's the provision of state law that governs the licensing of mortgage loan originators. And these provisions would clarify how the criminal histories for applicants for mortgage loan originator licenses are analyzed by the banking department's licensing staff. And what this does, it aligns New Hampshire state law with the requirements of the Federal Secure and Fair Enforcement for Mortgage Licensing Act, what's commonly referred to as the SAFE Act, and the laws of other states. So what we were seeing is New Hampshire law differed from other states as well as the federal requirement standard. And we are seeking to put our law in alignment with those, because what happens often is you will have mortgage loan originator applicants applying in dozens of states. And the goal is to make the system more uniform across the country. So our law will align with the laws of other states. And that's what that achieves.
All right. Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 1207? Seeing none, we will close House Bill 1207. In just a moment, we will open 1502. It is. We do that. Oh, this one's fast. Goodness gracious. I don't see the representative. There he is. Welcome back, Representative. I'm going to go ahead and open the hearing on House Bill 1502 and re-welcome Representative John Hunt.
Okay, I'm back. So, this one actually, oh, Tara's gone.
She is.
The reason I say that is that Representative Reardon, when she was on the House Commerce Committee, was my UCC guru.
Oh.
And this is UCC.
Mm-hmm.
So just to remind all of you, UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, is the idea that there are some issues that we want to have uniformity with around the country, that we all have the same laws, but that it was not going to be done federally, that would be in state statutes. And so therefore, UCC is somewhat holding in the hands that we are not going to amend it or do too much to take it out of uniformity with the rest of the states. So we all have, we are similar. And our UCC representative is the next person.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to get detailed questions about what's in this UCC, he's probably better than I am.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions for the representative? All right. Thank you. He's the only person testifying, so don't go far. Right. Mr. Charles Mooney, please join us. I've been admiring your bow tie. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Charles Mooney. I'm one of two appointed uniform state law commissioners in New Hampshire. The other is James Scully, who's a practicing lawyer and a former counsel for Governor Sununu. And the Uniform Law Commission is an organization of states, and the states appoint commissioners. They can appoint as many as they want, but the votes on acts are one vote per state. And 1502 is a complement to what I consider the Uniform Law Commission's crown jewel, Uniform Commercial Code, as Representative Hunt mentioned. I'm sure many of my commissioner colleagues would say, oh, our area of the law is much more important, but I'm didn't appear here to showcase my modesty. In any event, this Special Deposits Act, Uniform Special Deposits Act, is a product of a multi-year effort by the Uniform Law Commission with drafting committees that meet for 2 days at a time over 2 years, is read line by line, word by word, 2 times before the commission, before an act is finally approved. Special deposits under the bill address some problems that exist under current law. They're essentially bank accounts or credit union accounts that are in the nature of a protected off-the-rack escrow agreement without the time and trouble to negotiate and enter into a formal escrow agreement. A special deposit is only such if the depositor and the bank so agree. So it's strictly opt-in. It's part of a bank's toolkit for customers that a bank may or may not choose to offer, but it's there for the using. One thing that's relatively clear in New Hampshire and in most states is that when there's a special deposit, example would be in the nature of an escrow for a sale of a business or real estate, for a commercial tenant, as you discussed earlier with HB 1336, New Hampshire has extensive protections for residential tenants, but not so for commercial tenants, which would be benefit from this law. The special deposit has to provide for at least 2 beneficiaries and provide for contingencies that are events that are not certain to occur, but when they occur, they trigger the depository bank's obligation to pay the specified amount to a beneficiary. The law is pretty clear that if the bank is insolvent, when it's clearly labeled a special deposit, the creditors of the bank do not get to reach the assets represented by that obligation. But there are a number of other things that are not clear. One that's cleared up by the House Bill 1502 is what about if the depositor is insolvent? In many cases, this is problematic and undermines the use of a special deposit because if the bankruptcy trustee, for example, can call back that deposit into the depositor's estate, then it's failed of its essential purpose. Here, when the depositor makes a deposit under the act, it's not the property of the depositor anymore. It's actually nobody's property, really. And so the creditors of the depositor cannot reach it. It also provides protection for creditors who would seek to reach a beneficiary's rights. It's only once the contingency occurs and ripens into the depository bank's obligation to pay. When that ripens, then of course it's like any other asset of the beneficiary and can be reached by creditors. Similarly, there's specific protection against claims of the depository bank. Its rights of set-off or recoupment against that deposit are very limited, essentially to the bank's fees and what's owed to it in connection with the deposit, not some unrelated loan that a beneficiary or the depositor might have. So in conclusion, I think this adds to the toolkit that financial institutions have for the benefit of their customers, including consumers and small businesses. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Reardon.
I was listening to your explanation of the definition of depositor, and you said it's funds that the bankruptcy trustee can attach or can't attach without the contingency.
Well, currently, under the law of most states, the the insolvency representative of the bank is generally prohibited from reaching the special deposit. But as far as the depositor, so for example, a landlord or as far as the depositor's creditors are concerned, it's not clear. And there are many cases where it has been clawed back into the depositor's insolvency, bankruptcy case. And so this act makes clear that that's not possible.
One
Yes.
follow-up. On line 8, the account agreement, is that necessarily an agreement between the depositor and the bank, or that could be a contract that the depositor has outside of the bank?
No, it's the deposit agreement between the bank and the depositor, and they have to expressly agree that it's a special deposit under this act for it to apply. If there are current arrangements, they could amend it so that they would get the benefit of this act, but there has to be an express agreement. A beneficiary, depending on the transaction, may or may not be a party.
One more
Ma'am.
follow-up. So all of the existing transactions that are out there in the world now, security deposits or escrow accounts for the purchase of real estate, what happens to them when this goes into effect?
They would not be affected. They would be existing as they are. Of course, as we know, residential tenant deposits in New Hampshire are protected with trust accounts, but otherwise they would remain. But if parties to those agreements decided we would really like the benefit of this law, then going forward, they could amend their deposit agreement, the account agreement, and provide that it's subject to the Special Deposits Act.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 1502? All right. Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on 1502 and very shortly open 1765. Thank you. Very quickly. All right. Let's open the hearing on House Bill 1765 and re-welcome Representative Hunt.
Okay, change of venue.
Yeah, this one's fun. Not that the last one wasn't, but this one in particular. Do you like the last one?
Just to humor you, many years ago, House had a committee that was called Regulated Revenues, and all the liquor bills went to regulated revenues. And at that time, the Speaker Sytek felt that judiciary had too much going on and wanted to create the Criminal Justice Committee. So they wanted to get rid of the Regulated Revenues Committee, partly because Regulated Revenues did liquor and did horse tracks racing, which was a dying industry. And so she was looking around who should take over liquor. And at that time, I passed the direct shipping law so that everybody could buy booze across state lines. And since that was seen to be so remarkable, that at that point, the House Commerce Committee then became the Liquor Committee. And happy to see that once this committee changed from banks to commerce, that you two were able to share in that important responsibility.
Okay.
So, several years ago, and I would say have to date it, but Representative Leno was on our committee to help date how back this was. I think you were gone by then, but we went up to the cidery here in Hopkinton, and he pulled me aside and said, we have a lot of customers who just, they come in with their spouses and they just don't want cider. They just don't want, and they would always say, "Can I have a beer or wine or something?" They usually wanted a beer, right?
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, no, that's this." When we passed this statute, to allow them to have tastings and then allow them to be able to charge for the tastings and then have more than one and have the full pie. So over the years, we've had many legislation related to beverage manufacturers' tastings. And I said, I don't know, that's going to be problematic. And so I kind of forgot about it. Now, turning the clock now, I mean, it's going to be 5 years or several years later. My son-in-law, who now is in the cider business, he mentioned to me, he says, I don't know if you noticed it, but the beverage business is really crashing. Okay, and way we know it is that we just look at the beer tax, and we can see that the beer tax is not growing, is slightly declining, and otherwise we say beer is flat, and so we needed, so we certainly something we can do to help. And I said, and he said it would be nice that we could have beer at the cidery, and or wine, and for that matter. But certainly wasn't talking about distilled, which we'll be discussing on another bill. So it was I said, well, I don't know, this is a problem. I said, let's see how we can spin this. Let's say we're doing something to help New Hampshire businesses. So this is really, because really tastings is really a touristy type thing to go around and taste things. So wouldn't it be nice that we would then say, okay, you can have other products, you can have beer and wine, but they have to be New Hampshire beer and wine. And that's this bill.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Are there any questions for the representative? All right, seeing none.
Boy, you guys are so nice to me.
Well, you're a nice guy, so why not? All right, thank you, Representative. Erica Rosenfeld is here. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm glad to hear we're the fun ones. Good morning, and thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for hearing us today. My name is Erica Rosenfeld. I own Post and Beam Brewing in Peterborough, and I'm also the president of the New Hampshire Brewers Association. I'm here today to speak in support of this bill on behalf of both of those. As Representative Hunt said, this bill allows manufacturers who do not also hold a restaurant license to serve other types of alcoholic beverages made in New Hampshire, excluding liquor, while remaining under the 1 or 2 drink rule. So that is 1 if they don't have food, 2 if they have food from an outside source. Currently, these manufacturers are only allowed to serve their own product, which in most cases, because I'm talking for the NHBA right now, is beer. It also applies to cideries. Allowing them to bring on other New Hampshire-made beverages would be an immense opportunity for growth, allowing them to bring in that non-beer drinker crowd as well. So it does boost the entire craft beverage industry, not just beer, and it allows small businesses to support each other across the board. With an eye towards our tourism industry, this bill does emphasize New Hampshire-made beverages, and it gives visitors to our state a true taste of what the whole state has to offer. Not everyone enjoys beer, which is wild to me. As I'm sure you know, gluten sensitivity is also an issue that breweries are contending with. Wine, cider, seltzer, kombucha, those are all excellent gluten-free alternatives that are made by producers in our state. Out-of-state consumers are accustomed to visiting tap rooms in their own states where they can walk in and get this entire variety. So you can imagine their disappointment when they show up to a tap room in New Hampshire and are told it's beer only or cider only. Allowing all of our state's beverage manufacturers to offer the full spread would benefit both the businesses and the consumer, creating a more hospitable tasting experience and a better experience for their entire visit to New Hampshire. In addition to its benefits for beverage manufacturers themselves and consumers, it does also help other stakeholders, including the distributors. Each new account, each new tap room that would be allowed to serve these can then sign on and buy through distributors. Helps everybody. I'm going to switch to my own brewery perspective now. My brewery does have a food service license, so we are allowed to sell guest taps and cider, which I do. So the previously mentioned benefits don't impact my tap room directly. What it would do for me is expand the market for my self-distribution. So if we, for example, do a collaboration with another brewery, such as Wild Bloom in Littleton, he would not be allowed to serve that collaboration currently because he can only serve things manufactured in his facility. So this would help us really continue our collaborative industry at a time where, as Representative Hunt said, it's a tough time for liquor. And this would really just sort of boost all of us, get all of our names as small breweries out across the state. We don't have huge bandwidth, so it would help us to be in multiple tasting rooms. I believe you guys have a full letter from CJ, our executive director, that has more details on all the stakeholder interests. We'd be happy to answer any questions on that. But otherwise, thank you for your time.
All right, questions? Senator Fett?
It's not a question, it's a statement. You have one of the coolest breweries in New Hampshire. Just want to say that. I think the building was 1800s it was built, right?
1837.
1837. If
Yeah.
you guys are ever in Peterborough,
I'm going
it's
just
an
to see
amazing
them.
Well, thank
and
you.
awesome beer as well. So thank you for being
Thank you so
here.
much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate
There's
that.
a good restaurant there. I'm stopping and see you as well.
And we also have a small farm that sells pizza from a food truck on the weekends. Support farmers too.
You need to carry some Wagyu. All right.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. All right. Steve Ayman. Ayman? Alman. All right. Oh, that's an L. Okay, great. Good morning.
Sort of like Elijah Blue, but we won't talk about that. My name is Steve Allman. I'm representing my small brewery in Canterbury, Canterbury Ale Works. Been doing that for 15 years. I'm speaking in favor of this bill. Craft beverages in general, I think, are really kind of the front of house face of New Hampshire in terms of the eyes of tourism. And anything that we can do to create interstate parity, opportunity for these small, craft beverage businesses in New Hampshire, I'm all for it. And
Okay.
that's my
All right.
story, and I'm sticking to it. And
All right, very good. I appreciate that.
Canterbury Ale Works, by the way, is the very coolest brewery in all of Northeast Canterbury.
You know what?
Well, I got to do both.
There are many cool breweries.
Careful there, Senator. All right, well, we'll be sure to visit both. Are there any questions for Mr. Allman? All right, seeing none. Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time to be here, everybody. All right, is there anyone else who would like to testify in House Bill 1765? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on 1765. Yeah, let's do that. Do I have a motion to, no? You don't want? Okay, all right. All right. Actually, we're not going into executive session for a very logical reason. So with our business the day being done, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.